Good evening, and welcome back to another lullaby. Tonight, I want to tell you a story from the Pearl of the Orient, the Philippines, and about a woman who was attacked by a Manananggal. What is a Manananggal, I hear you ask? Well, a Manananggal is the scariest of all creatures. And dear listener, sit back, turn off the lights, pull up a nice warm blanket and cover your head, and prepare to learn about the Manananggal. Growing up as a teenager is never easy. There is pressure to do well in school, peer pressure from friends, and of course boys. I met Alicio when I was 16. His good looks and fun personality made me fall deeply in love with him. One thing led to another, and I became pregnant. My family are devout Roman Catholics and deeply religious, and they would not accept a pregnancy outside of wedlock. My father was filled with a boiling rage. I'd never seen him so angry in my life. I remember him saying, "You are nothing but a fool, an embarrassment to the family." He screamed at me before he cast me out of the family home. I fled. I ran from my home. I was afraid of what my parents would do. I did the only thing I could. I went to Alicio's house. His house was finally built, and his parents were wealthy and could afford a beautiful home. The green garden spread out in front of me. Many coloured wildflowers covered the grass, and there was a mixture of oranges, pinks, and reds. Reaching out nervously, I knocked on the front door. There was silence, and I stood there nervously, fidgeting with my hands, wondering what I would say or do. The door creaked open, and a middle-aged woman stood before me. Her salt and pepper hair was styled with finery I'd never seen. Gold strands were entwined in her hair. She looked much like a goddess of old. Her attire was that of a businesswoman. Her dark navy blazer and pants looked professional. Alicio had told me she was a politician in Manila and would come home every few weeks to spend time with her family. "So, you are the harlot that corrupted my son," she snarled at me. I'm sorry, ma'am. I had nowhere to go, and I was hoping that you would allow me to stay with you," I pleaded, tears welling up from behind my eyes. Before I knew what was happening, there was a flash of silver, and I felt something stinging my stomach. There was a molten blade in her hand, and it was stained with a deep red. I knew I had to run. She was trying to harm the unborn child inside me. Turning from her, I ran as fast and as far as I could. "Don't ever come back here, you harlot!" she screamed behind me. I fled into the forest. I had nowhere to go. The darkness of the place started to pull the innocence from my soul. I wandered for days, each tree melding into the next. I no longer cared. Maybe it'd be best if I faded from existence. The sound of water rushing nearby woke me up. I had nothing to drink and my mouth was parched. It hurt to swallow, and the dryness tore at my throat. Pushing through the foliage, the green gave way to a silvery river. Its clear currents looked inviting, lulling me to it. Stumbling forward, my bare feet stung as they stepped on the jagged river stones. Dropping to my knees, I didn't even reach my hands to cup the water. I pushed my head into the clear water and started drinking. The coolness felt like it was revitalizing my soul. After my fill, I lifted my head and stared into the distance. What I had done deserved such a fate. "Are you okay, girl? You look hungry. If you want some food, you should come with me." A voice shocked me out of my pity. Looking towards where the voice had come from, an old woman sat on a large grey boulder. Her eyes were a dull brown and looked like they were losing their sight. Her hair was silvery grey, and it looked like it hadn't been washed in some time. Her nose was disjointed and crooked, like a deformed beak of a bird, and her face was covered in so many wrinkles that betrayed her old age. Her nose was raised high as she looked at me. Her nostrils were flaring as she sniffed the air like some mongrel dog that caught a hint of a delicious aroma. I had no words. I nodded my head, and the old woman got to her feet and started walking. The effort seemed almost too much for her. She raised a single finger and beckoned me to follow her. As we walked through the winding labyrinth of paths back into the forest, Time seemed to slow down. It felt like we'd walked for hours through the mud and the dampness. She didn't speak a word as we walked. She was surprisingly nimble and moved at a speed that seemed unnatural for a woman of her age. Soon, the path opened up, and a small bamboo house appeared. The fixed chutes were used for the walls, and the roof was covered with a dark brown nipa leaf. As we entered her small home, she pointed to a seat made of a dark brown rattan. I sat down, and the wood bit painfully into the back of my legs. I almost let out a yelp of pain. The old woman soon returned with a bowl of soup and a plate of rice, which she set before me. The steam carried off a strange aroma that I didn't recognize. Somehow, it didn't smell right. But I asked her anyway what the meat was. "Baby pork." She chuckled as she encouraged me to eat. My stomach was aching from the hunger. I picked up a spoon and fork and I started to eat. The texture of the food seemed unusual. It didn't feel like pork. It felt smooth, and the taste was strange. As I ate, the old woman stared at me. Her eyes never left me for a moment. I felt rude eating while she was there. "Would you like something to eat? Please join me," I asked the woman as I slurped down the food. "I'll eat later, Anak," she mumbled. I stayed with the old woman for a few months. We didn't speak much, and she would always disappear overnight. During this time, I never saw her eat. Every day, my belly became more prominent, and I could feel the baby starting to kick more. It would be soon that the birth would occur. One night, I awoke to a sharp pain in my stomach. It was so intense, I couldn't think straight. My only thought was, I'm losing my baby. I wanted to scream in agony, but the sound was caught in my throat and would not escape into the night. My body was frozen in place. No matter how hard I tried to struggle, an invisible weight was crushing me. But I could hear someone nearby. There was a moaning in pleasure, like the sound when you are savouring something delicious. There was a slithering and slurping sound, and it frightened me. My belly felt like it was getting lighter and lighter. Something was deeply wrong. The following day, to find that my stomach was empty. There were red stains all over the sheets and my legs. The baby was gone. I looked around for the old woman. I needed help, but I couldn't find her. That night, the woman came home. Her face was filled with a contented rage, and it was directed right at me. "Leave my house. You're not welcome here," she said with an eerie calmness. I can't. I've lost it," I sobbed. "I know," she said, wearing a sick smile of a deranged person. I sat there motionless. That same weight from last night was back, and it was crushing me. No longer knowing what to say or do, I just sat there. "You know, girl, I ate your baby last night, and it was delicious. Now, you wretch, I'm going to curse you to live my life." She cackled as a hand reached out and grabbed my jaw, forcing my mouth open. She leaned forward, and her mouth started to open. A long, slender tongue rolled out of her mouth, and my eyes spread open in terror as I saw what was wrapped inside. There was a tiny black baby chick. Its feathers were wet and matted. Its glowing red eyes shone in the room's darkness, and it let out a deep growl that should not have been possible for a bird. I started choking as she pushed her tongue into my mouth. The black chick disappeared inside me. It was only then what I realized what she was doing to me, and what she was, a Manananggal. I was now doomed to become just like her. The following day came quickly, and the old woman was gone. She passed along her curse, and now she would never be seen again. Light streamed through the cracks of the bamboo walls. My eyes recoiled in pain and fear. A million pinpricks stabbed at my eyes. I needed to avoid the light at all costs. My weakness was gone. A new strength was in my body, and it yearned to be released. I was sure that I could do anything I wanted. Maybe this was not a curse. but a gift. My mind turned to the cause of all this. Eliseo. Time passed in a blur. It would take time to master the gifts the old woman had given me. As each day passed, a hunger was building inside me. It surged through every part of my body. I could no longer eat traditional foods, and if I tried, I'd become violently ill. At first, raw bloody meat curbed my hunger, but now, it no longer satisfied me. Just a little bit longer, I thought. During my exploration, I realized I wasn't far from home. I could make it there in less than a night, and there was someone I needed to visit. When I found them, they were walking together, holding hands and laughing. How delightful they looked walking together. Their happiness would fade, just as mine had. He had tossed me away like garbage and sent his child to that beast to be fed on. I waited for the next night to lay my trap, and I knew he could not resist one of the gifts the old woman had given me. Thanks to the old woman, I could tweak my appearance. I could grow my hair at will, change the shape of my face and eyes, and no longer look like the girl who loved him. I heard him approaching, so I pretended to twist my ankle. I moaned in pain. He ran over to me and asked if I was alright. I smiled, knowing that he had fallen for my trick. He helped me up, wrapping his arms around my body, and his hand lightly brushed my chest, innocently. I pointed to the direction of my home, and we started walking. We chatted a bit as we walked, and I leaned heavily into him as I pretended to limp. My tiny house loomed before us, and I asked him sweetly to help me get inside. We made it inside the house, and he helped me sit on my bed. He sat beside me and rested his hand lightly on my leg. I smiled coyly as I invited him to move closer. His lips pressed firmly against my mind, remembering when I loved him. Reaching up, I forcefully felt his face under my palms. He felt hot to the touch, which only inflamed my hunger. With a bit of pressure, I pushed him back onto the bed. As I rolled over on top of him, my fingers moved from his face slightly across his chest. Eliseo was enjoying it and started to increase the passion of his kisses. They traced lower until they rested over his belly button. I pressed down hard and was greeted by a wet warmth. Eliseo's eyes flew open and he started to grunt in pain. Fear seeped out of his skin. It was a pleasant scent that reminded me of a freshly baked bread. Pulling my lips away from his, I allowed my face to revert back to my own. Do you remember me now, my love? How did you throw me away? How you cursed our baby to be taken by a beast. She ate it. Our baby. She ate it. Just like I'm going to eat you. My voice hissed at him with the venom of a viper. I don't know how long I feasted on his flesh. His stomach, heart, liver gave me pleasure like I'd never felt before. Finally, I was satisfied. Looking down at him in disgust, I whispered my final goodbyes. Your new friend smells so good to me. I know she's going to have a special treat growing in her belly. And it's just for me. I'll wait until it grows just a little bit more. A new hunger blazed in my eyes as I thought about my next meal. Thank you for watching. I hope you enjoyed today's lullaby. If you enjoy my content, please like, comment, and subscribe. And remember, keep watching for what's in the dark.